Chapter 7, Motivating Your Athletes. We all know the importance of motivation. We know that it's a complex subject and it's not just an oversimplified thing dealing with one area. We know that different athletes are motivated at different times to do different things, or they want to achieve different levels of success. So we're going to break down motivating your athletes as best we can in this chapter. First, let's talk about the basics of motivation. If you understand what your athletes' needs are and you help them to fulfill those needs, then you possess the key to motivation. In the text, it referenced that sports psychologists have learned that the two most important needs of athletes are one, to have fun, which is the need for stimulation and excitement, and two, to feel worthy, which means they want to feel competent and successful. These are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're attempting to motivate your athletes or to determine even what demotivates them when it comes to competition. It's necessary to understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards and to determine which are more important to your athletes. When you work with a team sport, this can get a little bit complicated, and you may have a mixture within your team. You may also have an athlete who has both intrinsic and extrinsic motivating factors. Intrinsic rewards are the feelings that come from participating in your sport. That's having fun, the camaraderie, knowing your capabilities, and just participating. Where extrinsic rewards are provided to the athletes externally. That comes in the form of trophies, medals, praise, trips to tournaments, and even bragging rights. Many times, extrinsic rewards are directly impacted by the wins. And so, what you want to do is make sure that you are able to focus on motivating your athletes through both of these areas. So, let's go back to this core need to have fun. Each one of us is born with the need for stimulation and excitement, or fun, to be more specific and just to be more simple about it. The balance between fun and activation is different from person to person. When the text references this, it's talking about our stimulation. So we seek stimulation or we seek to play even at a very young age. But in sports situations, that fun or that stimulation or that playing can lead to anxiety, which we'll talk about later, and that can ruin our experience. So, the balance between fun and activation, which is our level of activity, that's going to vary from person to person. But when we reach the balance between those two, it's called the flow, which is in the second chart there. It talks about the optimal level of flow. Okay, when we're experiencing flow, our attention is centered on the activities. So we're not critical of ourselves, we're not worried about our successes or our failures, we're just focused on the activity. The flow experience is the thing that's intrinsically rewarding. You're doing something because you enjoy it. And then when you get into that flow zone, that's when you're in between your boredom and anxiety. So, how challenging is it compared to your ability? So, the more difficult something is for you, the more anxiety it can cause. And on the flip side of that, the easier something is for you, the higher the boredom can be, which means you're less likely to be motivated to continue to participate in that activity. Next, we'll talk about the need to feel worthy. We all share the basic need to feel competent and capable so that we can experience success. Often in society, success is equated with winning, and that cannot be the case for your athletes when you're working on motivation. When we do this, we run the risk of equating our achievement or our winning to our self-worth. And our self-worth is not directly influenced by winning alone. As a coach, it's essential that you clearly define success and teach your athletes that there can be success in losses as well as in wins. Athletes who fear failure will find that there's little joy in participating in their sports. So let's look at failure-oriented versus success-oriented athletes. Success-oriented athletes can handle the occasional failure. They don't focus just on winning, and they'll work to improve or learn from their losses. They take credit for their successes, but they also accept responsibility for their failures. If they lost, they look at the situation as these are the things that I need to improve, or these are the skills that I need to work on, or maybe I wasn't pushing myself as hard as I normally do. A failure oriented athlete will attribute their failures to their lack of power, meaning, I'll never be able to do blank because of my skill level or my ability. The officials were against me. I was injured. I really wasn't playing that hard, so I didn't expect to win. And a lot of times, athletes will use this as a crutch so that they don't have to step out into the unknown. Both of these things can tie into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Just like athletes assign reasons to their successes and failures, coaches will assign reasons. These reasons can lead you to assign attributes to your athletes, and it can influence the expectations you have for your athletes. Remember that you can't just look at a specific player and have expectations, either intentionally or unintentionally communicate those expectations, and then be surprised when the athletes fall into that area or into that expectation that you've set up for them. You have to make sure that you're continuously encouraging your athletes to improve and avoid tearing them down. Building your athletes up is a key component to motivating them, but it's also that you find that balance between building them up and coddling them. Give them the opportunity to fail and the opportunity to grow. If you don't give them this opportunity, then they become afraid to fail and in turn may become afraid to try. Athletes learn to feel failure when they start to transition from a more recreational to a more competitive area of sport. If you think about shooting basketball in your driveway or playing catch in your yard, you're doing that again for that fun factor. There's no emphasis necessarily placed on performance. It's just learning how to do it. It's having a good time. And so athletes learn to fear failure when there's an emphasis on performance and not learning, or they've set unrealistic goals for themselves. For example, I'm 5'9". I cannot dunk a basketball. It is highly unlikely that I'll ever be able to dunk a basketball. So setting a goal for myself to dunk a basketball is not going to be in my best interest. And I'll start to fear failure because I've set this unrealistic goal for myself. Instead of trying to be like the best athlete in my sport, it's instead to try to be better today than I was yesterday and to figure out a way that I can improve for tomorrow. The other thing that kind of helps or leads to athletes learning to fear failure is extrinsic rewards and intrinsic motivation. So yes, I'm playing for fun, but if I don't win, I don't get a trophy. And so then you have athletes who were initially intrinsically motivated because they felt good about the sport or they enjoyed participating in the sport. But as those extrinsic rewards were given out to others and not to them, they started to lose that motivation to play. The next thing that you have to do is remind your athletes that success does not always equal winning. You have to find a way for your athletes to experience success and identify success as it comes in the form of growth. Failing forward is something that you can do to try to help your athletes to manage the times when they don't win. Failing forward basically means that it's okay to fail in some situations if you're able to learn from your mistakes. They have to be able to take risks and step outside of their comfort zone. They need to learn constantly, meaning each experience helps us to prepare for the next one. They have to search and reapply, which means they don't necessarily always have to learn from their mistakes. They can learn from other people's mistakes. And finally, they have to be able to accept failure. It's a natural part of the path to success. You will have failure. You will not always win. And again, those two things do not go hand in hand, but it's key that you identify that they are able to fail forward so that they continue to grow and are continuously motivated. The next thing you want to do is to set realistic personal goals, set team goals. You can use those times during practice to go through those individual goals. And then those team goals may be more effective or more applicable during competition. And you also have to recognize your limitations. Help your athletes to see that their strengths are not always the same as others. Again, my skill level and my ability are not going to be applied to my sport the same way as my teammates. By doing this, you'll enhance the motivation of your athletes, and you'll also help to lower the risk of anxiety. Remember that just as there is an optimal level of activation for having fun, there's an optimal level of activation for performing well. And when that optimal level for performing is not balanced, anxiety can occur. The fundamental cause of anxiety is uncertainty about whether you can meet the demands or the expectations of your coaches, your parents, your teammates, and your fans. In order to reduce your athletes' anxiety, it is critical that you clearly communicate their standing and your expectation. This references back to the previous chapter where we talked about effective communication. It's also key to remind your athletes of the goals, not just the goal of winning the game, but the importance of improving and making forward progress. This could include following the game plan, working hard, and doing their best in improving. By emphasizing these areas, you can help to reduce the anxiety that your athletes may start to feel during competition and help them to maintain a motivated attitude. Finally, remember to reflect on what your athletes have progressed through during a season or during a competition. Use every success and every failure as an opportunity to address how they have moved forward, and don't just focus on the wins and losses. It is important to talk about wins and losses because those are key, but it's also important to have takeaways for a time when the plan may not be carried out in a manner that results in a win.